Good morning. Today, Unitarian Universalists across Iowa and around the country are celebrating Climate Justice Revival. It's an opportunity to slip into a very positive vision of possibility for a healthy planet if we can make that commitment. First, let's identify the current context. Our house is on fire. Climate scientists tell us that the environmental doomsday clock is close to midnight. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has warned that if the planet warms to 2 degrees Celsius, 20% of the land animals and 30% of the insects will go extinct. We see the crisis worldwide. Forests burn, ice caps melt, ocean water rises. Cities live under clouds of pollution and animals go extinct. The global family is suffering as well of the causes of this climate crisis, but time after time and conference after conference, there is little action that makes serious difference. Today, we'll take time to look at the challenges and the possible actions that we might take. In 1988, National Geographic celebrated its 100th anniversary with a holographic cover that pictured planet Earth and the caption, "Can man save this fragile Earth?" That's a great question, but it's very challenging since humans are the cause of the fragility. If humans are going to save the planet, we have to be able to imagine the changes necessary for major transformation of how we live and how we care for Earth. Toni Morrison has reminded us it's not possible to constantly hold on to crisis. We have to have the love and the magic. That is also life. So for a few minutes, I'm going to invite you into a fairy tale. If you think that all in the choir was fairy tale, here comes another fairy tale. All right, and then we'll look at some positive climate change. So here we go. Imagine the Earth in 2050. Okay? How old are you? Imagine. I'm 103. And by some grace, as Dennis spoke of a few weeks ago, I have lived to see a world that I dreamed of throughout my life. So go with me on this journey and enjoy what I've seen. It'll take great imagination because it's part fairy tale. Oh, you have trouble with imagination? Well, remember Alice in Wonderland, where Alice says, "I can't believe that." "Can't you?" said the Queen in a pitying tone. "Try again. Draw a long breath. Shut your eyes." Alice laughed. There's no use trying. One can't believe impossible things." "I dare say you haven't had much practice," said the Queen. "When I was your age, I did it for half an hour a day. Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." Imagination. Now, it's 2050. Remember how old you are. Engage your imagination. Remember, we're looking back over 25 years. In January of 2025, there was a United Species Conference. Physicist Brian Swim talked about this in his book, "The Universe is a Green Dragon." Every species on Earth sent one representative to the conference. Humankind sent its representative. You know, there were 8 million species at this conference. Imagine. The issue on the table was, should humankind remain on the planet? There was divided discussion with many angry comments and many calls for humans to be removed from the planet, with the belief that the earth could then restore itself. Well, the elephant spoke with ancient wisdom. I believe there are good people who want to help the earth survive. And the ants contributed. We heard about ants. The dolphin. Humans love and protect their families. These people will join in saving the planet. And the coral. Oh my goodness, it's impossible to imagine our planet without coral. We need humans to understand the web of life. And the bee is pollinating, and the butterfly, and the spider. Oh, you like the image of the web for connecting all life on the planet. And the redwood tree reminded the species that forests are the lungs of the planet and must be protected. Each species had a voice because all the species recognized the collective contributions and participation of each member of the web. After every voice was heard, it was clear there was some powerful division. Finally, the dog spoke and suggested that humans might have one more chance. As man's best friend, the dog said she thought human intelligence could come to an awareness that all life on the planet is connected, and cooperation rather than competition is the way forward. Well, you can imagine the news spread all over the world of this United Species Conference. Well, I remember my relief. I heard that the species agreed to give humans one more chance. Yes, we can do this. So what happened next was equally remarkable. Now remember, we're looking back. In June of 2025, just months after the United Species Conference, there was a gathering of every country on Earth, and it was called a Planet Survival Conference. Representatives from every human population were there. There was no need for discussion about the threat. That was well known and documented by climate scientists. There had been many conferences in past years. Global warming was visible from outer space. So, the question, what does humankind need to do to restore and save planet Earth? The representatives began to name all the issues. They reflected on the wisdom of Native Americans, who identify all species as all my relatives, Metakuye Oyesen in the Lakota language, all my relatives. The immediate issues threatening the planet were greenhouse gas, nuclear weapons, polluted water, deforestation, the lack of sustainable food production across the globe, the harm to thousands of species that were becoming extinct due to human abuse of the environment. They needed to not only name the threats, but to plot a way forward to halt the danger. And finally, the representative from the Maori people spoke. She said, we must look at some of the root causes of these issues. She said that humankind must move from competition to cooperation. We must recognize ourselves as a global family and put our resources to work for the good of the total web of life. Well, could the human family cooperate for the common good of the earth? Here we're going to leave the fairy tale, but don't leave your imagination. If we can imagine survival, we can make it happen. There are critical issues. Here we're going to see the issue of rising sea level in Bangladesh. When we look at climate justice, now keep that in mind, climate justice, we acknowledge that poverty and environmental racism are involved in climate issues. We see waste disposal plants near low-income neighborhoods. We see nuclear sites on indigenous land. The Waste Isolation Pilot Project to dispose of spent uranium is located at Yucca Mountain, a sacred site. So, since fossil fuels and greenhouse gas pollution have been known for years as major contributors to global warming, the oil and gas corporations are among the first to be challenged. Just in the last couple of weeks, the UN Pact for the Future has finally included fossil fuel in its third draft. There is a global call for international fossil fuel treaty to manage just, orderly, and equitable decline in fossil fuel production. Now, on September 20th, just a few days ago, Kumi Naidu was elected president of this fossil fuel treaty initiative. For 30 years, he has been an environmental and human rights activist, a leader globally. So people were very excited about him being chosen as president. He said, "Throughout my life, I have sought justice for those marginalized by unjust political, economic, and energy systems, especially in the global South. The fossil fuel treaty is a movement for global justice." Yes. Now, along with the reduction in oil dependence, there must be a focus on the life cycle of single-use plastic, since it is a petroleum product. Plastic has been one of the greatest discoveries in the modern world, and also one of the greatest sources of pollution due to the life cycle of petrochemicals in the plastic. And you may have seen, California is suing ExxonMobil for decades of deception about recycling plastic. It's a critical issue for us. Now, there are also local efforts to deal with solar and wind energy for electricity. Imagine a city that is run completely on solar energy. Georgetown, Texas. In 2015, Mayor Dale Ross, who happened to be a Republican, made the switch from fossil fuel to 100% wind and solar. Rather than focus on climate change, Ross used price stability and long-term contracts from renewable energy companies. He said, if you solve the economic argument, you will win the environmental argument by default. Al Gore applauded Mayor Ross. However, and there often is a but in these stories, with rising energy costs, some folks began to think, well, no, we need to go back to fossil fuels. So there is some controversy. I do not know the latest about Georgetown, Texas, but the effort is there, a totally energy efficient city. Well, automakers have also stepped up to address the climate challenge. There is a new electrical vehicle plant by Ford and SK Innovation in a $5.6 billion mega plant on 6 square miles called Blue Oval City in Stanton, Tennessee. They will be manufacturing the next generation of electric F-Series pickups, and advanced batteries for Ford and Lincoln. The Biden administration has committed $1.7 billion to retrofit 11 factories to reproduce electric vehicles. And they are building 2 advanced lithium-ion battery plants in Glendale, Kentucky. And here's the but. We also have to acknowledge there are human rights and labor issues with the mining of lithium, especially in China. So that's going to be a controversial piece of the story. We look at farming sometimes. In the 1990s, Gabe Brown was a North Dakota farmer rancher, and he was going bankrupt. Farmers often concentrate on the most profitable single crop, allowing the land to lie bare between seeding and using pesticides and herbicides to kill weeds and insects. Well, Gabe heard a talk by the Alberta, Canada rancher Don Campbell. If you want to make small changes, change the way you do things. If you want to make major changes, change the way you see things. Now, Gabe discovered the agricultural practices of native Mandan people who use cover crops to restore the soil. Gabe began to look at farming through the eyes of nature and moved away from chemicals. As sustainable farming practices grew around the world, there was appreciation of efforts to introduce new ways to produce grain. The work of Wes Jackson, many of you know. Wes Jackson and the Land Institute in Kansas brought greater attention to kernza, a perennial grain. And just down the road at Joya Farm, our friend Wendy, I didn't find a picture of Wendy. This is one of her sheep. Wendy Johnson produces kernza. So she's just up the road at Charles City. Also, Iowa State University has partnered with Alliant Energy to produce a 10-acre solar farm that supports agrivoltaics. I had never heard of this before. Agrivoltaics, which means the active farming and solar happen in the same place. So what we see here is plants growing beneath the solar panels. All right, and the issue of saving forests is so critical, as the redwood tree mentioned, among the species. Taking in carbon dioxide and putting out oxygen. The forest also has plants that offer medicinal benefits. The Yanomami tribe of the Amazon have perfected many medicines from plants in the Amazon. We've got to save these forests. In an effort to use more solar and also save forests, many organizations are supporting solar ovens in developing countries, so they won't need to cut as much wood. And the solar ovens work great. Well, the species are watching, and they're noticing what humankind is doing. In the Paris Agreement of 2015, thousands of cities and educational institutions and financial institutions were encouraged to cut carbon by 50% in 2030. Cities are responsible for 70% of the world's greenhouse gas. Worldwide, more than 800 cities in more than 100 regions plan to cut their emissions to net zero by 2050. Now, more than 2,200 American firms, including Amazon, Gap, Target, Nike, have joined We Are Still In coalition to help fulfill the U.S. Paris Agreement pledge. We Are Still In is an interesting website to take a look at. and see what their effort really is. But we know we're off to a late start, so success in stabilizing the climate is far from guaranteed. We have to restrain large energy companies who produce fossil fuel. And it's very hard because there are billions of dollars at stake. And the US still counts on fossil fuel for 80% of its energy. So we have this contradiction, supporting fossil fuel and trying to move away from fossil fuel. Let's hope that the fossil fuel treaty goes forward. Now, there is hope for the survival of planet Earth. If we can imagine a healthy planet, we can make it happen. Our children and our grandchildren to the 7th generation will be most grateful.